How can you determine where on the internet a file was downloaded from? Well, there are a lot of different ways, but one that I'd like to show you in this video could be pretty useful as a forensic artifact on Windows, and that is the mark of the web. And you might already be familiar with this, not even realizing it, but to show you, I've downloaded this file here. I have putty.exe on my desktop. You know, Putty, the client for SSH and Telnet, oftentimes ran on Windows. And if I were to right click and take a look at the properties, you can see down at the bottom here, the security row says, hey, this file came from another computer, and it might be blocked to help protect this computer. So maybe in some instructions that you've read, following a guide, doing some schoolwork, I don't know, whatever case, maybe you've done this for just stuff that you tend to do, you would just, hey, unblock the application and then go ahead, click apply and okay, and then fire it up. But before we do that, let me actually click cancel here because I want to show you something interesting. I'll open up the command prompt. Let me start with cmd.exe, actually, just to showcase this in old school command prompt. All the OG binaries before we get into PowerShell and the commandlets here, but if I were to take a look on my desktop, here is my putty.exe. I listed that out with the dir command to just list stuff in the directory, but if I were to clear the screen and run that again with /R, that will actually display some of the alternate data streams for files. And you can see we have a couple interesting ones here, right? We have putty.exe smart screen $data. That $data notes that there's really content there, and the colon will denote the name of the alternate data stream. You can see another putty.exe zone identifier, and there's some data there. And let me actually copy this so we can open it up in just a second. But I do want to show you that dir/r will tell you, if you actually take a look at the help segment with the /, that will display alternate data streams of the file, just as we've showcased. But now let's actually go ahead and open up with Notepad, just a simple text editor, pasting in putty.exe zone identifier $data. Now we've showcased alternate data streams in other videos, there's one that I'll link below, but if I fire this up in Notepad, you can see this actually has some interesting details here. And this is a pretty worthwhile forensic artifact. If you're retaining the mark of the web, this is it. This is the zone transfer alternate data stream that tells you a zone ID. In this case, it's just the number 3, and we'll chat about that more in a little bit. But even the refer URL as to, hey, the website that this seemingly came from as you were downloading this program, this file, whatever the case may be, and the host URL, which gives me the exact link, the actual online address in the URL where we got this putty.exe program file binary, anything we downloaded. Now there's nothing fancy here, there weren't any tricks, it's literally just opening up the alternate data stream. Let me take a look at what we saw was, I believe, smart screen. Let's enter that $data there and fill that out. That just displays the string Anaheim, which I believe is some component. That's another breadcrumb that Smart Screen might use when it's trying to determine, okay, do we need to scan this further before it actually runs on the computer? And that's what this mark of the web, zone identifier, alternate data stream, all this is actually for in the first place. It's to protect your computer from unknown binaries or files that you just got from somewhere on the internet. You don't know where from, maybe, or you don't know if it's trusted or not. So if I actually minimize this, let's go now click on our putty executable and see if it runs. Well, it runs just fine, but if I were to now right click and see the properties, in this case, okay, it was just fine firing up the exe. I didn't have to unblock it, but now getting back into our terminal, let me clear the screen one more time. I'll use that dir/R, but now I don't have the zone identifier mark of the web. The smart screen data wasn't all that interesting for us, just the zone identifier alternate data stream. But now that the file has been unblocked and Smart Screen did whatever it might have done to do its analysis, and it probably realized, okay, we've seen this file enough times across the whole World Wide Web and internet that we can allow this thing to run. But you have probably seen pop-ups and dialog boxes just like this where you would need to either unblock the application or go ahead and run it anyway, and that will just let it do its thing. Let me actually run that back and showcase this in PowerShell. I'm just going to clear the recycle bin here, and I'm going to get back to my web browser so I can re-download Putty in this case, just to show it to you. Moving that from my downloads to the desktop, just so you can see it in action. Obviously, right-clicking properties, it is still going to include that security notice, and we would have to unblock the file, thus removing the mark of the web. But now let me actually get into PowerShell. I'll open up just the regular Windows terminal. Let me move into my desktop. And the commandlets you might use in PowerShell are get item. We can run get item on putty.exe, and that'll tell us, hey, there it is, it's putty.exe. But that actually takes another parameter and argument for a stream, and you will need to supply that with a dash or a tac or a hyphen, and from there you could actually specify what alternate data stream you want to examine and actually take a look at. If you don't know, in case there are any other hidden ones not strictly the zone identifier, we could just use an asterisk, and that will tell us a bunch of different stuff. But take a look. You can see the original content and data that isn't in a alternate data stream, but just the usual actual data stream and contents of the file. You can see Smart Screen, as we've seen before, and the zone identifier. So being able to view that in PowerShell is actually really easy. We can use get content on our putty.exe and then specify with tac stream, once again, the actual stream that you'd want to include, or an asterisk there. So let me use that zone.identifier, and now we can see everything that we just previously saw within Notepad, just using PowerShell commands. Easy peasy. Now, our example with Putty didn't actually show the Smart Screen pop-up, message, window, and dialog box, letting you know that, hey, this is still an untrusted and risky file. Here's a fun fact, though. There are actually multiple different levels of risk for files that you download from the internet. I'm sure you've seen this Smart Screen pop-up, but you've also probably seen this one. Hey, wanting to open a file, given a security warning, you get this ask, and it tells you a little bit about how files from the internet might be harmful. Here's the thing, though. Threat actors, hackers, adversaries, whatever ill-intended bad people will try to social engineer you to run malware or whatever exploit tool that they might have from something that you just have downloaded from the internet. So they might genuinely instruct you and straight up tell you, just like in those guides, the schoolwork, or whatever other example we were kind of riffing on earlier, to click unblock and let this thing run. There are a couple other protections, though, that we could use to actually get in the middle of this and maybe thwart some of those threat actors' schemes, social engineering, and potential malware threats. I'll tell you about those and dig into the mark of the web forensics a little bit more in just a second, but first, please let me tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Snyk. I use Snyk to scan for vulnerabilities in my software development projects. And if you aren't familiar, Snyk scans your code, dependencies, containers, and configurations in real time, making it super easy to keep your application secure. You can use Snyk for free forever with my link below, and you can import your repositories and let Snyk do the work for you to find and fix your vulnerabilities. And there's some pretty cool and exciting news. Snyk has just released a collaboration with TryHackMe. Check out the new Snyk code and Snyk open source rooms to explore real-world scenarios, learn to identify and fix vulnerability, and enhance your security skills. Get started with Snyk today, totally for free, and try their new rooms on TryHackMe, all with the links below in the video description. jh.live/Snyk and jh.live/Snyk-THM. Huge thanks to Snyk for sponsoring this video. All right, so let's get back to the mark of the web, and I want to show you this page. This is Microsoft documentation, and it's chatting about information surrounding the attachment manager in Microsoft Windows. And this is actually a good segue into discussing mark of the web and kind of what happens when you try to download a file or a program from the internet. Tells you a couple workarounds if you do see some errors or you're getting that notice from like Smart Screen, like a virus scan failed or a virus detected. You could try to work through some other internet properties in the security tab as to what internet zone. I really like that little typo on Microsoft documentation. Cool. Anyway, sorry. What I do want to drill down into are these registry keys. You could actually tweak and change as to whether or not it's going to show you some stuff pertinent to the mark of the web and files that you download. Whether or not you're on the blue team or the red team, I think this is worthwhile information. You can actually create a low privilege user registry key in HKey current user Hive, so everyone has write access to your own account, doesn't need local administrator. But if you were to create this attachments key, you could actually drill down into and set a couple other flags or parameters or actual registry settings here, like whether or not you want to scan with antivirus, whether or not Smart Screen should do what it does with files that you download and try to run. You could set a dword value to set that to 1 or 0. Good thing to note here, they actually suggest setting that to 3, the number 3, to enable the virus scan right after you completely open or save a program or file. But I was mentioning just a little bit about the different kinds of risk for files that you download from the internet. There's high risk, there's medium risk, moderate risk, and low risk. And a couple of these have some interesting things as to whether or not, hey, they're actually going to be set, determining what their risk value is and what association they should have with other files. The default value of the default file type risk registry entry is moderate, 6151. So if it couldn't tell based off of a file extension, and that's genuinely all that it's using to be able to determine the risk here, again, whatever protocol handler that Windows might use, that is something that you can tweak. But there's an even more interesting registry key that I wanted to chat with you about because, and again, I'm noticing maybe some strange stuff in the documentation. This line here is talking about the default file type risk registry key. It goes on to explain an entirely different registry key, then notes the default value of that same exact default risk type, whatever is set to something different, which is not what it's talking about, so I don't know. But I digress. Take a look. These are some registry keys that actually determine whether or not mark of the web and the zone information is actually going to be saved onto a file. The wording here kind of confuses me a little bit. They say by not preserving the zone information, Windows cannot make appropriate risk assessments, which makes sense. If you enable this policy setting, Windows does not mark file attachments by using their zone information. So if you disable this policy setting, Windows marks file attachments by using their zone information. So you know what? We should just go ahead and try to open this registry key and see if we can just see it in action. Let me get back to my desktop and I'll open up the registry editor with regedit. That'll prompt for user account control, UAC, and let's see if I can navigate to that key. Let's see if it exists, for one thing. Doesn't look like it does, so again, we would need to create that. We can see that over on the left-hand side. Remember, it just said in the documentation, we can create these attachments key. And it notes up here, if the save zone information registry key is actually not configured, if you don't have the policy set in group policy or through registry, then Windows will mark file attachments by using the zone information, doing mark of the web as we've seen. So can I actually just set this to off? Let me copy this, bring it into regedit, and then create a new dword value with that name and actually set that to off being 2. So fingers crossed, let me go back to my desktop once again. Let's kill Putty. Let's remove it, try to download it from the internet again. Hop over here to the download page. Let's pull it down. Let's go see that in downloads. And if I right click this file to see the properties, that still has the security key. You can see it here, the security row and that block checkbox is all there. So I don't know, and I got to admit, is it like, am I misunderstanding? Is my reading comprehension totally wrong? I'm trying to make sense of these phrases and sentences, and it says the default value of it is off, but I'm assuming it is actually saving the zone information. So please someone tell me whether or not I'm crazy in the comments, and I'm totally cool with being told that I'm crazy, or if this just documentation is kind of weird. Because if I go back, let's start from a blank canvas here. Let's remove the putty that we just downloaded. Let's go back to the registry where we could toggle this save zone information value now to 1. Which according to documentation is saving zone information on, but that's when I don't see it happen. Like, let's go back to download putty once again. You can see it's coming down. Let's open it in downloads folder. Now when I right click properties, the security checkbox, hey, unblock thing is not there. Mark of the web just isn't there. So I don't know if I'm wrong or stupid or dumb. I don't know. Actually, I do know. Probably I am dumb and stupid and wrong, but that one is making me extra confused. I think this one is worthwhile to discuss though, because there's an entry here on how you can hide mechanisms that are allowing you, the user or end user, to remove the zone information, like clicking unblock on the properties tab or checking that in the security warning as it pops up in the dialog box. There is a registry key and a group policy setting you could actually set to like not allow that to happen so that users can't make that stupid mistake and click the button and do the thing and run it anyway. That value is called hide zone info on properties, and we can futz with that. Let me actually remove the save zone information so that way we should continue to get mark of the web as usual. Let me actually remove putty and clean this all up for a blank canvas here. Downloading again, checking the properties. Okay, security block is back. Let me close out of this and let's go open the registry editor so where I can add that new dword value of the hide zone info on properties. And at least trying to follow along with this documentation, once again telling me the wrong registry value there. Default, I don't know whether or not I trust it considering the last example. Let's try to toggle that to the value 1 and see what happens. Make this a 1. Now let's get back to our downloads folder. Let's right click, check out properties. Still have that there. So let's try that with 0. Enter that. Test the experiment one more time. That still displays the block. I wonder if it just needs to be a new fresh download. Once again, man, I have downloaded a lot of putty. Test again. Right click properties. Ooh, we found it. Now that will not display the security block, and I actually had to go toggle it back to hit the hide zone info on properties to the value of 1, which the documentation, or at least reading this article, said if you enable this policy setting, Windows hides the checkbox and the block button. Okay, so that's what we did on being 1, but it had to be a new file that I downloaded. So once you set that, it's for all the future and subsequent downloads for files there. So that's good to know. And I don't think there's a whole lot more that we really need to drill down into here. Talks a little bit more about the high-risk file types, moderate-risk file types, low-risk file types, and actually if we explore those, you could see down below, it'll tell you what you might actually be able to see those those file extensions being. And take a look through this. I'll be sure to add a link in the video description, but you'll see the different sort of zones that you might get for like that zone identifier, that number 3 that we saw. And we'll chat about that more. Again, I do want to show you some even more resources, but let me show you the high-risk file types. You'll note this includes all of the file extensions that you might be able to see that Microsoft and Windows is just saying, look, it's a little bit sketchy when you download these. For whatever reason, .exe is in there, but it didn't seem to do what it was supposed to do when I tried to run putty, but I'm totally maybe in the wrong there. We've got medium risk file types, we've got low risk file types, and these are just plain text files and regular static images. But with all that out of the way, now being done with that Microsoft write-up and article, I do want to show you a couple others. If you are willing to tag along for the ride, I do want to cruise through just this article from Mike Wolf. I do want to showcase a little bit of a write-up from Outflank and actually a little bit of insight from Red Canary. So we'll do that in just a second, but let me throw in another Easter egg. I'm actually going to hop over to my Kali Linux virtual machine here, just so I can get into like a sane terminal and developer environment, right? Let me move into some of the capture the flag challenges that I have created previously. There is one of these called Breath of the Wild, and that is a joke on the old mark of the web. I can show you the challenge.yml kind of configuration here. This is the challenge prompt for this forensics category, Breath of the Wild, where I say, look, I got a sweet desktop background for my favorite video game, but now I want more. Problem is, I forget where I downloaded it from. Can you help me remember where I got this old wallpaper? Here's a backup of all of my wallpapers. For security reasons, I set the drive password to be video games. This was a challenge in the NomCon 2024 CTF, and it included a zip file to download, so we can bring that over to another Windows machine, because ultimately, this is going to be a BitLocker drive. Now, I had included this as a 7-zip archive, but that should include the BitLocker drive in it, so let's hop over to Windows. Let me paste in the file here, and I'll go ahead and extract this with 7-zip. Let's do just extract out to wallpapers. That's fine. We'll open that up. Okay, and this isn't the BitLocker drive, so I guess the file that I had saved is skipping that step. I'll show that to you in the PowerShell code, but the reason that I did that was so that it's in a container file, and it'll actually keep track of those NTFS and like the Windows file system metadata. Because bear in mind, the contents of the file is not changed, or the hash is not modified when a mark of the web is applied. It's just adding the alternate data streams. So what we could do is actually move into this directory in our command line. Back into PowerShell, just as I was in the desktop previously, if I actually were to try to get item on everything here, you can see they're all listed with all of the different file names. That's just fine, all the different backgrounds. And I had just downloaded a ton of different like, hey, cheesy video game wallpapers or images, right? You can see a ton from, I don't know, Fallout, right? Heck yeah. There's some Minecraft stuff with Daft Punk, looking good. Is that Assassin's Creed? Call of Duty. Talking about that H2M mod, am I right? And we could just use the get content commandlet and that tax stream argument to get all of the alternate data streams, including the zone identifier and the mark of the web. But I think it's worthwhile to showcase you could do that just as well with other utilities. Hey, Autopsy will work just as well. And I noted this was with BitLocker, and that's all to kind of allude to, oh, the Breath of the Wild gimmick, meaning the mark of the web in this case. And Autopsy does a great job kind of cutting through it. It'll just showcase all of the different URLs, all the identifiers there in a table and column rows. And that little Link character in the Tingle outfit does have the special secret sauce here where the host URL as part of that zone identifier mark of the web has some URL and hexadecimal encoded data. Obviously that included the flag, and that was working well when they ripped it through in CyberChef, and with that, you could pull it out. You could grab the flag. So these are all the exact same concepts that are discussed in the articles that I did want to cruise through here. I don't think there's a whole lot more to showcase with Mike's article. I think we talked a lot about how, look, it is an NTFS metadata alternate data stream and not actually manipulating the contents of the file. So the hash, the actual signature, is not going to change if you were to use hash check or any of the other utilities like the PowerShell commandlet get file hash. But I did allude to the idea of a container file, like something like a zip archive or a VHDX, as you saw in like the BitLocker drive that I provided in that CTF challenge. All these things, even like an ISO file that may or may not carry the mark of the web through within the archived and contained files. This was actually quite a big thing way back in 2022 when there was some CVE or vulnerability where like a specially crafted zip file would not pass through mark of the web metadata in the internal files. I think Microsoft fixed that, but it was for the default unzip utility with Windows in a specially crafted unique zip archive. By default, it should naturally do that. However, 7-zip and some other utilities would not funnel down the mark of the web for the internal files. This is showcased here in test do events, a zip file that he was sharing, noting the unblock checkbox there. Using the default WinZip, Windows unzip utility would work just fine. Mark of the web is still present, but 7-zip won't actually do that. And this is very well known, by the way. This isn't new groundbreaking information by any means. If anything, I'm late to the party because we had the mark of the web conversations like 2 years ago, but I do want to get the info and education out there for you. The Outflank article is really cool because it's chatting about it from a red teamer's perspective. Like if you're doing penetration testing, if you're an ethical hacker or whatever, look, this is old, 2020, bear in mind, but a lot of the information is still just about there. Same exact sort of introduction showcase that I've done everything here in the video. Good breadcrumb though on those zone identifiers for the zone ID. We discussed that ours was number 3 when we got to see that within Notepad and on the command line. That's just from the public internet. But you might be familiar with all those internet options and different security zones. Of course, you have local computer, hey yourself, local intranet, like your LAN 192.168, whatever. Trusted sites that you might have, hey, actually designated as you believe, you trust, and you know that's a valid verified site, then the World Wide Web, and even restricted sites. They discuss the same exact save zone information like registry tweaks or settings and configurations that we were just playing with. But I do think it is very, very cool as they showcase a lot of these different examples for other applications, like a Microsoft Excel file for like a Word document. They include some interesting things in the developer world, even in like Visual Studio project files. It'll display a warning for any project file that has the mark of the web attribute set. However, if we actually kind of keep cruising, they talk about this in the use of like Git and the Git clients. Apparently, file clone from GitHub with Git client does not have the zone identifier alternate data stream in mark of the web. I'm not sure if that's changed in the past 4 years. We could validate and verify, but I do want to bring that idea to you. Maybe an exercise for the reader. And okay, last resource, I promise I'll shut up, but I think this one is especially worth noting because it gives you some code to play with. And really what I had used to even build out that Breath of the Wild Capture the Flag challenge. Discusses everything that we've showcased already, blah, blah, blah. We can cruise through that, but they note some of those default high-risk extensions. At the time of writing, the following extensions are considered high-risk by default. Now, in this list, this is the same thing that we saw on that attachment manager Microsoft documentation, but I don't see .exe in this list, and our PuTTY application ran just fine. So again, I'd love to be schooled. Let me know in the comments, what am I missing? I'm sure there's something. I'm willing to learn. Let me know why I'm wrong. Here's some other sweet stuff though. They do include some visibility and actually some like file monitoring, telemetry information, things that you might be able to pull from your EDR, even like sysmon event IDs. That's kind of sweet. All of this is kind of, hey, tracking that syntax, obviously zone identifier as the alternate data stream, given the file name, and the contents that contain a host URL, as we've seen in Notepad. You can even pull this down with the event tracing for Windows, ETW, and man, my goodness, we got to make some videos on that stuff. It's super cool, but obviously you can pull out whatever would be here. The ETW log there is Microsoft-Windows-Smart Screen, and a mark of the web is included in the event fields. Same thing with IE and their Smart Screen rendition. Anaheim Smart Screen would probably play well with what we saw as one of those alternate data streams. If anything, that is just breadcrumbs, puzzle pieces, stuff you can latch onto, and they cover a whole lot of these detection opportunities, which are nice and cool. The testing tidbit, though, is awesome because you can play with some of this, as well as, I don't know, maybe just GitHub repositories that you've seen out and about, to be able to easily add this mark of the web and the alternate data stream zone identifier to any file that you want. They give you some PowerShell code. Just adding a function here to put the mark of the web note on that file. Loops through it with whatever you want to specify. So generally, copy pasta, look, hippity hoppity, their code is our property. You can just run that. You know what? Let me just do that. I want to see if some of their examples we can just like roll through. Let me open up PowerShell one more time, and we'll go ahead and just slap all that in. They give us some quick syntax just to be able to spit together a C# compiled binary. That way we could actually end up building that with copy paste on the command line and then using our mark of the web function to get that in action. Let's see if that will work here. Now with that all copied, we should have our test.exe present. And let's add our mark of the web here, and if we tried to run it, I'll paste that in, it should do what it should do. Excellent. And now let me open up Explorer in this directory. Obviously trying to right-click on our test properties here should show us that unblock checkbox, but our registry keys are still in effect, so we don't even get to see it, which might be a fine protection for your end users if you want to roll that out. I don't know, totally your call. But if I try to double-click on this, what does it do? Hey, there's a smart screen. Goodness, I should have just started the video with this example. My God. Run anyway, because YOLO. And they mention the high-risk extensions just as well, in which case they use it with a Visual Basic script. They use outfile test.vbs and then use the same function to get that in action. Let's see if we can use that. Done. Back to Explorer. Let's double-click on our test. And hey, gives me that security warning. Everything we expected. We could open it up and it's just our hello world message box, but at least we got mark of the web in the mix. And if I may please tell you, this is exactly how I had put together the PowerShell script that will generate the Breath of the Wild Capture the Flag challenge. I can open this up, but genuinely, literally, this is the exact same function from Red Canary and that resource there. So big shout out, big props, big thanks to them. And then everything else is just sort of, hey, crappy stuff to try and stage. Hey, maybe some of those HTML URL encoded hex values for the URL, and then a bunch of crap to be able to add the URL resource in the mark of the web and kind of stage this all as one drive. Just that BitLocker drive and VHDX file we would upload and give. But I thought it was kind of neat. I was pleased. I know it's an easy challenge, right? Running through it, but staging it and putting it all together in one automated way, one shot, was sweet. With that, I am done rambling. My goodness, thank you so much for watching. If you somehow made it to the end of this video, please comment below. Just the words link tingle. Like, then I'll know. I'm sorry, I feel like I've been rambling, but I am grateful for you watching this video. I hope you learned something new. Hope you got to dig into Mark the Web if you haven't played with it before. Hope you are armed with some new tools, some new syntax, some more resources to get you in the action all this. And I hope it is a valuable little artifact if you do some of that stuff in the Windows world, or if you're using it for blue team, red team, whatever, purple team, whatever team. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do all those YouTube algorithm things like comment, subscribe. Please do give some love to our sponsors. Big thanks to Sneak for helping support the channel, letting us keep doing what we do. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.